the people who got you to a certain point will not get you to the next point, or sometimes they should just never have been there.
You got to take time to sit back and see the whole forest, not get lost in that.
It's not always just about growth, but what kind of little aha moments or light bulb things have happened with the clients you've worked with? Welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I am Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm your host for this podcast. I am a certified EOS implementer, an FBA-accredited family business advisor, and also a business owner myself with several business interests. I started this show to share my passion for creating a better life by creating a better business. And I bring guests onto the show who are prepared to share their highs and lows, but also talk about the things that have helped them to create that better life. Today's guest is really interesting. He is a type 2 fun addict. And if you don't know what that means, that is doing the stuff that's hard. So it's not the type 1 fun where you just go out and enjoy yourself. Type 2 fun is where it's really, really hard. And at the time you wonder why you're doing it. But at the end of it, you go, wow, that was amazing. He started his career in engineering, manufacturing, and aerospace, and then actually left that to go and grow a business from nothing to $10 million in 3 years. He is based in the US, but he has been to 6 continents around the world. And Matt is going to share with you today some of the reasons why he became an EOS implementer, the tools that he finds really invaluable, and the sort of success that he has achieved by working with companies with EOS. So I'd like to introduce you to Matt Hansen, who's a professional EOS implementer. So welcome to the show, Matt. It's always great to get fellow EOS implementers on the show because we're all very passionate about this whole better business, better life concept. Great to have you here.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I'd love the listeners to hear your story because it's always fascinating to me. The EOS implementers come from a wide range of backgrounds. And we were just chatting before we came on the show. And you've got a background in engineering and manufacturing and aerospace, which is not what I would typically associate, with EOS. So tell me a bit about your journey to where you got to now.
Yeah. As a kid, I grew up in the country. My first job was I was in 3rd grade. I wasn't paid, but I was standing on the back of a hay wagon, helping my dad bale hay because I grew up in the country. And so that was my first job, but went on from there. But I was always a kid where I loved just like classical engineer, looking at widgets and dreaming up ideas and all those sorts of things. And that's what I love to do. And so when I went into college, I didn't start engineering. I sort of tripped into it. But when I got in there, my grades were much better because I loved it, right? It just fit me. And so, however, when I was a young engineer, I had a number of patents. And one place I was working, it had an opportunity to turn that into a business. And so myself and a couple other guys were the core start of that. And we built that up and it turned it into, I think we brought $10 million a year in sales. Took us 3 or 4 years to get there, something like that, I think.
I've got to ask, what was the product?
So it was advanced manufacturing. It was a way to join metals without normal welding, something called friction stir welding, but which isn't so important to know what it is. But it was just kind of a new thing. It had been invented by the Welding Institute in the UK a few years earlier. And so we licensed that and started developing and building things and made machines that did it and sold it to manufacturers. So that's what I did.
Cool. So you built up a business that had 10 million turnover. That's pretty impressive.
It was great. It had big projects, right? Everything, $1 million projects. Didn't take a lot of those to do a lot of custom things. But it kind of was a niche, right? It was a newer technology at the time, less than 10 years old, probably 10, 15 years old. And it flat-lagged, right? Within that time frame. And so I decided I wanted to see what I could do in the corporate world. So I left and I went and just climbed the corporate ladder for a while. That's how I got into aerospace. And at one point, I was responsible for a couple $100 million a year in sales and got exposed to a lot of different technologies, a lot of different roles, went from engineering to lots of different things, a generalist in the business sense. I was as part of aerospace, right? Lots of big companies get gobbled up by other big companies. And at a certain point, I was like, I'm kind of tired of that. Wanted to see what was it like in little businesses again. I kind of missed that, right? That freewheeling, moving fast, all that kind of thing. And so I went and I left and I ran a small business. It was about 50, 60 people for an owner. And we did something very different. So if you've ever seen videos of cars getting slammed into walls, like that crash testing, that's what we made. So very unique niche business. but super fun. It scratched all those engineering itches that I still have, even though I haven't been an engineer for a long time. But I did that. But it was a challenge, right? It's a challenge because I'd learned how to be a good leader, a good manager in big multi-billion-dollar companies. And I knew what I wanted to do, and I worked hard with the leader, the owner, to understand his vision. But it was a challenge because all those things didn't port very well, right? So it was a challenge. It was a struggle to work through those things. But through that, ultimately, I'd always wanted to own my own business. I hadn't been an owner of that little business a long time ago. I was part of a founder, but I always wanted to own my own business. And so I started to explore maybe buying a business or explore, other sorts of maybe being a fractional executive, all sorts of different things. Because at that time I was probably 52 and I was trying to understand, what do I want to do for the rest of my career? And ultimately I realized I wanted to go help people. That's what I really wanted to do. That's what I always did when I was volunteering or something else. I was always trying to teach and coach and things like that. And as I sort of explored things, I learned more and more about EOS, and just each door kept opening, and it made sense for me. While I don't have an experience of working in an EOS company before I started doing this, 20 years ago, I was trained as a lean practitioner. And so I've been leading Kaizen events and strategy events and leading sessions. And the company I worked for had an operating system that they had developed. And it was similar to EOS, but different. And so it all made sense to me. Like it all clicked, and I could see how the big company and the little company and my experience of leading sessions, and it all just came together. And that's how I ended up what I'm doing today.
Awesome. I have a similar story. I also hadn't worked in a company running on EOS, but I'd run big businesses. Just to be really clear, big business in New Zealand is probably a small business in the US, but nevertheless, a couple of hundred staff. And what I've loved about EOS was all the things I had been doing or trying to do came together in a framework in EOS. And so it was, for me, it was like a light bulb moment of, okay, this is actually what I've been doing kind of naturally, but here's a framework to actually bring it to life. So I love that about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just makes sense, right? I mean, we always say it's simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it's definitely simple.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was back in February 2024, right? That you became an EOS implementer?
Yeah, I went through boot camp, and it was great. And I'd heard a lot about the community, and it was almost overwhelming because when I went through boot camp, it was at the annual, right? There's 800 people or 800 implementers are all there. And we're our little team of, I think, what was 18, 16 of us, maybe, I think, that went through boot camp together. Our little bitty group in our little room for 2 or 3 days ahead of, and I remember we walked out of the room and there's like all of these people. It was almost overwhelming, but it was great. It's such a welcoming community. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's sometimes described as a cult, and I think that's a little bit cruel, but it is definitely, it's a shared passion, right? I know that every one of that's 846 of us now. And, when you get into the room with that many EOS implementers who are all driven by the passion to help people, it's phenomenal. I mean, it blew my mind when I came to Dallas and spent time over there in the Dallas one. In APAC, we're a little bit smaller. We've only got 46 implementers in the APAC region. And in my boot camp, there was 3 of us. So a much smaller kind of scale, but still, I knew I'd found my tribe. So tell me about what it is about EOS that you love. What are the things that really attracted you to it?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. One, on the first, is its simplicity. It just fits. It clicks. Like you mentioned earlier, it's a simple thing. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple. And there's a tool for pretty much everything, right? Not 100% of everything, but you don't need 100% of everything. And so the simplicity is one of the things that I really love. The other thing that I like is the tools are great and super helpful, but the other thing that I find just really transformative, the real power of EOS, comes from, right? We talk about vision, traction, and healthy. I think the most transformative part is the healthy part of actually getting people to really talk, work through hard issues, be on the same page, really be a healthy team. And I'm sure your experience is probably similar to mine. Everybody in the beginning says, yeah, we're a healthy team. And then they get into it and they realize, well, maybe not as much as we thought. And I think that's the real beauty of EOS, I think.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because when you start working with a client, you're right. They all say, yes, we're very healthy. We have all the difficult conversations. And in the first couple of sessions, you can see that they're all happy and all agreeing with each other. You kind of think there must be a little bit more underneath this. And by the time you get to the third or fourth session, they start to realize that actually this is a great, safe environment to have these conversations and to really start challenging some other things that are going on. And I love it. It's like a light bulb moment when you finally get that first little bit of conflict in a good way, so it's positive for the environment. Okay, so is there a particular tool that you love in EOS? Is there a favorite? I mean, you said there's a tool for everything, and there absolutely is. And I think this is something that people sometimes don't understand. We've got the 5 foundational tools, which is what you start with, but there's a whole lot more additional tools in the background. So when you've got an issue with X or Y, then it can actually help with that. But I guess, yeah, is there a favorite tool that you have seen to be the most transformative?
The one that I think is very transformative and I like is the quarterly conversations because everybody thinks, right? We all have, when we're a supervisor or manager, conversations with employees, right? Maybe not as much, but we have the idea. But what's so great about the quarterly conversations is it's focus. It's not a performance review, right? It's that really building the relationship and on a one-on-one level, being really, really clear with each other about what's working, what's not working, and ultimately trying, how do we go forward from there? I think that is a really powerful tool. Unfortunately, I think it's one that sometimes it takes a while for people to really understand, right? When we talk about you got to hear things 7 times, in my experience, my clients kind of have to hear it over and over again to be like, oh, I get it now. It makes sense. Oh yeah, I'm using it. Takes a little bit of time, but it's an amazing tool.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did a deep dive into it in our T group just last week, and it's a tool that I have used in my own businesses now, but also been teaching for a while. And what we kind of realized in discussing it, it's actually the linchpin for all of the EOS tools because it brings in the accountability chart, the structure, the roles, the functions. It brings in the rocks that they're kind of focusing on. It brings in their core values fit and the people analyzer, the GWC. And really, it brings all of that stuff together in an environment that encourages you to, as you said, to get to know the person that is sitting in front of you and to make sure that, and delegate and elevate as well. The delegate and elevate tool becomes part of that as well, as that, and making sure they're working in that zone of genius, their unique ability, the things that they can really help with. And I think it is underestimated. It is such a powerful tool.
Yeah, I agree completely.
So you've been working with a number of businesses now. What do you see as the main benefits of a business taking on board EOS into their business?
Yeah, it's really the clarity, the focus. Everybody loves to do lots of things. And when it really starts to click with people and they start to focus on the important, on the strategic, what's really important, and the other stuff, they start to not ignore, but let go in where it's right, the right time. I think that's the thing because there's so often when I'm talking to people where, I've had a client that used the term like we're drowning. That's the nice thing when and so it takes a while, right? It's not natural for you to the first session. People are like, oh, okay, I'll just, no, it's a journey. But I think that's the thing because that's also for me the most gratifying. It's great to have a client that maybe is growing really fast, whatever else. But what's really gratifying is when somebody feels like they can breathe, that they're in control again, that the human is really benefiting, not just the business.
It's true. We say less is more, less but obsess is my sort of go-to line because it happens a lot. And I'm not an entrepreneur myself. I have run multiple businesses and I do tend to get a little bit distracted by bright, shiny objects and I have 43 ideas before breakfast. And it's as a tool for me in my own business, it's actually helped me as the visionary to become much, much more laser sharp focused and to use the tools to recognize when I'm getting distracted by other things and go, is this actually leading me towards my 10-year target, my 3-year picture, my 1-year plan? If not, probably shouldn't be focusing on it. So it's great, what do you call it, a focus tool to bring you in to get real clear on what is important.
It takes the discipline though, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I had the same thing for my own VTO for my annual plan and a quarterly rock. I had some stuff on there just in my EOS practice. And then I got into the quarter a month or two and I'm like, wait, we're all right. Not doing that. It's a distraction. Get it out of there. It's not going to help me.
Yeah, well, it's like you have to build the muscle, don't you? You have to keep working on it all the time. And I have to say, I share this sort of quite openly, quite vulnerably, but I think we also try and do too much. And entrepreneurs are classic for this, right? So for the first 2 years of my EOS business action practice, I basically had 7 or 8 rocks for myself every single quarter. And every single quarter, I'd get 2 or 3 done. But I'd always justify it with, oh, yeah, but that was because it's like, actually, no, it forced me eventually, it took a while, slow learner. I eventually had to go, I can't do 7 or 8 rocks. I'm not able to do that. And once I cut it down to 2 or 3, then guess what? Because those 2 or 3 would actually get done and they'd get done well, as opposed to trying to spread myself thin amongst 7 or 8 different things and get distracted. And I think that is the power of it is You really need to focus on those things that will really move the needle, the things that will really take you towards where you want to go. And some of us take a bit longer to learn than others, but we get there in the end. So have you got any sort of success stories from the clients that you've been working with in terms of, because success, as you said, it's not always just about growth. Growth is great, and most of us want that. But what kind of little aha moments or light bulb things have happened with the clients you've worked with?
Yeah, I think it's usually been around the people things, right? So in terms of clients, right, you have clients that's had a lot of great success and things like that. But for me, the things that stand out are when people start to be clear. So for example, I had an owner who recently, there was somebody he had on the leadership team, and finally it became clear, like, oh, it's the wrong person. He'd been there since the beginning, since the company had been founded. And so like, yeah, no, this isn't working. And I think that's, to me, those are always the stories that really jump out. It's the person that ended up firing the family member, those kinds, right? And that's always like, everybody's like, what? But I'm sure you've seen it a million times too.
Yeah. It just transforms. And it's always, I do a lot of family business work, and this is why I love EOS, because I think the EOS tools take all the emotion out of it, and they start to bring you back to what's really important. And it takes away the relationships, the family stuff, and just kind of go, actually, do we have the right structure to execute on our plan? And then do we have the right people in the right seats? And sometimes the people who got you to a certain point will not get you to the next point, or sometimes they should just never have been there. And that's the reality. And it's hard, you've seen it with your clients. It's hard for them to let that person go, especially if they've been around for a long time or they're part of the family. But when they do it, that sense of relief, and the change is sometimes immediate, like the relief from the entire team, and what happens when you put the right person in that seat can be pretty quick to happen.
I think also it's sometimes the individual being clear on if they're the right person, the right seat. I've got a client, one of the co-owners, and he was in the integrator seat. And the reason he was the integrator, the CEO, right before he knew about EOS, was because like there was nobody else. So he did it. And then, but he was miserable. And we're about a year into the process now. And through that, he's slowly, right, he had a rock to figure out how to get rid of the seed and so it's been a process. But for him, I think when I talk to him, he feels in a different place, because he's now clear, like, I don't have to do this. I can get it off. We just got to plan it. I think that's also really a powerful thing to do.
Yeah, you're right. It's what the show's all about. It's like you can create the business with the right people in there. It does free you up to do the other things that make your heart sing, which is what we all want. We want for everybody in our team. We want everybody to actually want to come into work every day, love what they're doing, add the most value to the business, and not be overwhelmed, stressed, working ridiculous hours.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So there's lots of people tools in the EOS framework as well. Again, is there a tool in there that stands out for you in terms of its game changer?
Yeah, this is not a people tool. Well, I guess they're all people tools to some extent. But another one, and this is one that I wish I'd known about earlier, is the level 10 meeting agenda. It's so simple. And it's like I remember running programs and businesses and things in departments, and they were awful meetings, right? It was awful. And because we just get stuck on things where we were the classic, get in a room, tackle an issue, discuss it to death, and not really ever accomplish anything. And so the level 10, and that's always usually the first thing that people are always like, yeah, that's great. They feel the benefit of it right away. But to me, it was such a simple, but really, really great tool.
It is. And it's interesting. I actually went back. I've been working with a client on and off over the last 6 years. And when I say on and off, only because they actually graduated. And then they've invited me back in again because they felt like the wheels were falling off a little bit. And I observed their level 10 meeting, and we do this a lot as implementers to see how the level 10 meeting is going. And it's interesting. So they're now, they're 6th or 7th year into EOS, and they've bastardized the level 10 meeting agenda a wee bit. And it's seen, only small things, but it's amazing how if you actually just don't stick to the agenda, how you can get back into that thing of discussing and not really ever getting anywhere. Or even worse, I think, ignoring some of the issues. So they didn't drop some things down from the scorecard that they hadn't achieved. And I was like, why did you not drop those down to the issues as we've gotten to drop them down to the issues? And suddenly we had some really in-depth conversations about what could actually change. And we had some action points about what we could actually do from it. And I think that is the power of the level 10 meeting when it's done purely and you follow the agenda. There's no room to wiggle off and start, getting caught up in things that aren't important. And every IDS, every issue solving we do has to have an action point. So, you're not sitting there discussing with nothing coming out of it.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting is people starting to get better at the prioritizing of what issues to talk about. I had a client once who asked, what do we do with issues that are on the issues list for a long time? I was like, oh, it could be lots of different things. Could be that it's a really hard issue and everybody's scared of it and it's sitting there because you're trying to ignore it. Like that could be a thing. Or it could be you're doing exactly the perfect right thing is it's just not a priority and it's just going to sit there. And so someday maybe you do a cleanup and you're like, no, it's not an issue. Who cares? Right? It goes away. Like, or something in between. But it's always, it's interesting.
Yeah. I've seen it a little bit where I think that some, particularly on the beginning of the journey, some clients feel like they have to tick off all of their issues. Like it is a race. It's almost like a tick box exercise. And I actually say, no, it's like, actually, we should be dealing with the ones that are really important, giving them the time that they actually deserve. And you're absolutely right. If something sits on there for a while, then it means it's not important. Or I think the biggest one is the elephant in the room. I had one particular client with a whole bunch of shareholders where we're doing actually a shareholder level 10 meeting. And there was one issue that I knew it was the biggest issue in the room, but they all just kept avoiding it. And in the end, I said, why are we not talking about this issue? Because I know each of you individually has told me that this is actually the biggest issue. And they're like, we don't want to go there. Guess what?
We're doing it now. Yeah, I'm sure you probably have. Like the clients who are like, no, we don't really have any issues, right? There's nothing to put on the issues list. And then, I don't know, months later, you're like, oh, yeah, we had no idea. They had no problem coming up with issues. It's just they had to get used to it.
Yeah, it's not a normal thing to even talk about issues in some businesses. And I guess as you roll out EOS throughout the whole organization as well, and everybody's able to be part of a level 10 meeting, has the chance to start raising issues, then it starts to uncover things that maybe been sitting there for a long time, but nobody's had the forum to do that. And so that's when it's like building a muscle. Once you kind of get used to it, then you start to see things. And I always, when we talk about this, EOS is like shining a massive spotlight into every single corner of your business, and it highlights things that you really had hoped would never be highlighted, but all of a sudden they're there to deal with.
Yeah, that's true. What's your favorite tool?
My favorite tool, so I have to say, I would always say it was the accountability chart is one of my favorite ones. I think that's the one that most people who self-implement avoid that because it's probably the most difficult one. And I really enjoy getting people to really think about what's important. And I've always said the level 10 meetings, I think they are an absolute game changer. However, I have to say now that we've done a bit more of a deep dive into that quarterly conversation, I've realized the power of it. And this is after 5.5 years of implementing. I've been teaching it for a long time and I've always thought it's a great tool. But now that it's almost like there's been a bit of an aha moment for me in terms of it is that linchpin that brings all the EOS tools together and enables you to work with your people to really bring the most out of them. So I'm kind of leaning towards that quarterly conversation. I'm just in the process of developing a little bit of a pack to help people make it easier to have those quarterly conversations. So I know we've got the books like How to Be a Great Boss and we've got the tools, but just putting together things like emails that they can actually send out to their direct reports to get them, just to make it easy. I find often with, especially some of the smaller businesses, they're just too overwhelmed with everything. So the more you can make it easy for them, the better.
Wow, that's a great idea. I have to think about that.
I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. Don't get me wrong. EOS has got all the tools there, but it's just sometimes I know that, if we can make it just a little bit easier for them, I just know that when they do it, they're going to love it. And I had this similar thing with the clarity break. So the clarity break is also one of my favorite tools. I've got lots of favorite tools, but I love the clarity break because it took me a long time to actually take one myself. And then when I did it, I realized how important it was. And so I had a client that fought me for a couple of years, would just not do the clarity break. They said, no, I don't need to. I think when I'm in the car or I think when I'm doing this, it's like, yeah, that's not the same. You need to actually have complete stillness, complete silence. She eventually went and did it, and she went to a beach and she sat there with a blank notepad and pen. And she came back and she said, oh my goodness, Debra, that was the best thing I've ever done. I can't believe I fought you for such a long time. And now she's my biggest proponent of the clarity break. And she goes out and tells everybody how amazingly wonderful it is. So I think the quarterly conversations are like that too. I think if you can just do them, you'll start to see the power in them.
I think you're right about the clarity break, her experience and what you're saying, because I always thought I would be doing clarity breaks. Right? There'd be times it'd be quiet. I'd go for a run or I'd do, something. And it wasn't until recently on the flight home after the annual QCE in San Antonio, I sat down and it's about a 2.5 hour flight or 3 hour flight or something like that to Seattle. And I spent the time basically like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do clarity break. And maybe it was after the conference. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I ended up like filling 6 pages from all of these notes and all of these thoughts about what I can do to be a better implementer for my clients, what I can do to run a better practice, all this kind of stuff. And it took a little bit to kind of open it up, but once it got going, it really got going. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. You got to be still. It doesn't work as well if you're active doing a thing.
I used to argue the same thing myself. I go cycling every morning. When I'm cycling, I'm really, I'm not doing anything, therefore I'm thinking. But you are still doing something, whether you like it or not. You're still subconsciously, hopefully not avoiding hitting people. You're thinking about changing gears. You're doing all this stuff, whether you think about it or not. So the first time I did a real true clarity break, and I'm terrible. I'm distracted by things left, right, and center. So technology is the worst for me because a little thing pops up on my screen. I'm immediately wanting to jump in and do something with it. So the first one I did a real clarity break. We went away to a little place down by the lake where there was no Wi-Fi. And so I was forced to actually have no electronics, which is unusual for me. And so I took my Remarkable and I sat there, and it took a little while. And so, yeah, I was there and I was thinking, this is a waste of time. It's not doing anything for me. It's not really, I'm never going to get anything out of it. And it was only after I'd sat there for a little while and really absolutely stopped, where you talk about Gino talked about this in his EOS Life book, the glass of water that's got some sand in it. If it's always on the move, the water is always cloudy. It's only when you put it down, and it takes a while for that sand to really settle to the bottom, then you start to get the clarity. And so after, I think it's about 20 or 30 minutes in a flight doing nothing and getting frustrated with myself, all of a sudden the neurons in my brain just started firing. It's like, oh my gosh, I've got this idea. Let's just blah, blah, blah. And then before I knew it, I'd actually developed a whole new thing that I wanted to sort of start doing, which was fantastic. So yeah.
I love that visual. I'm going to need to, I have a session next week where I'm going to be going over, LMA and quarterly. I'm going to have to remember that for...
because you can do it in your session room with your water glasses. So great. And people just get it, right? They look at and you have to explain. It's got to be a very fine sand or a silt, because when you put the glass out, it doesn't immediately all drop to the bottom. It takes a while for that silt to actually settle onto the bottom. And then you've got the clarity. And so, you've got to push through I'm going to need something to do or something to play with. It's like, no, just sit there in silence. It will come.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. So, top 3 tips or tools for people listening in. What would you say are the 3 things that you would recommend they leave this podcast and go and do?
Well, I have one that is a non-EOS tool. It's a book. It's a non-EOS book. But for people who work in an international environment, cross-border, cross-cultural, I find a lot of people really click with it. So the book is called The Culture Map. And it's, I don't know, I maybe read it for the first time 15, 20 years ago, something like that. But so it's been around. But what it's about is there's a lady, she's from the Midwest of the U.S., but she was a professor teaching at one of the business schools in France. And her research was mapping different dimensions, cultural dimensions, across various, a lot of different countries around the world, and mapping where the different cultures were on a scale. So an easy example is one of those dimensions is context when we speak, right? So in the US, we're very, very low context, right? We say very usually direct and it's kind of concrete. Whereas in other cultures, there's a lot of history of the country built into it, and they have little sayings that to somebody from the outside will make absolutely no sense, but it makes sense to them. And actually, I gave you an American example of context as I described it, great details, a very civil convert, but it does that as well as in other dimensions. And I found it, so I worked for, 25 years in Asia, Europe, and Africa and different places. So I found it really helpful to look at when I would go into a new country to help me understand how best to interact and communicate with people and to interpret how they were acting. Super helpful for me.
And I think particularly if you think about a lot of teams now, I've got a lot of offshore teams as well. So in Vietnam, in Philippines, in Bangladesh. And you're right, there is absolutely a cultural difference there. And so it would help to understand how to better work with those environments, I'm guessing.
Yeah, especially if you're in a multinational, right? You got teams from all over the world and all that stuff. So that's one thing. Tips and tools. I think the other thing is, I really do like we talked about top tool or tip is the clarity break. You got to take time to sit back and see the whole forest, right? Not get lost in that. So that's probably another one. And then a third one. Oh my gosh, what's a third one? Put me on the spot. You told me ahead of time, and I'm still bad at trying to come up with.
I wonder if one of the tools that I do like with EOS, which they give away for free, is the organizational checkup, which just gives people a chance to have a look at where they are in their organization at the moment.
I think that, going along with it, the crystallizer assessment for visionaries and integrators, I think it's not as well known, but it's a great, because like that one client I mentioned, he's a founder. He was the CEO just because he thought they needed one. And so being clear on what you're good at, what you love to do, that's really good.
Yeah, no, it's true. I actually use it sometimes in sessions when I've got people who are not quite sure where they sit, or you've got a couple of people who think they should be the integrator. I just say, just do the test and just do it honestly. And let's have a look and see where your strengths are. It'd be great for you to know, if nothing else. And I always thought, because it said, it's designed to tell you, are you a visionary or are you an integrator? And I always thought, but what happens if you're neither? And I can guarantee that the test will actually tell you when you're neither, because I got my husband to do it, who's an actuary, who was neither a visionary nor an integrator. And it literally came back. He was 50s on both of them. It was like, no, you're not even close to either of these.
Along with that, another point is I think also I find with they're like, especially like STEM people tend to be very neutral graders, never too high, never too low, kind of right in the middle. I think that's the other thing, is it can skew results too. Allow yourself the freedom to say, no, I do like that. So I'm going to max it out or whatever. Don't be just so middle or like, oh, I'm just okay. No.
I never give fives. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so go with your gut and kind of go, yeah, actually, if you love something, be honest about it. Or if you really enjoy something, be honest about it. Okay, that's fantastic. Hey, Matt, we're going to put all of your contact details in the show notes so people can get in contact with you. But just from your point of view, what is your ideal kind of team that you like to work with?
So I like people. So for my personal style, I am the kind of person I like to push, right? My hobbies, I live here in Seattle. I'm going to spend the weekend in the mountains, mountaineering and doing hard things. And so I love people that are going to pick up the lunch pail and get to work. And so that's what I love. The other thing, because of my background in engineering, I work with everybody, of course, but I have a special soft spot in my heart for people that build things. So it could be construction or engineers or manufacturing. I like that because it scratches an itch in my personality that I don't get to do anymore. So that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So building or construction, they're really actually building things, making a difference. And somebody is not going to be afraid to be pushed, to really push into limits. I saw actually in your bio, so you do kayaking, you do mountain climbing. You obviously really enjoy that outdoor
I love it.
pursuit. Yeah.
Yeah, we call it type 2 fun. I don't know if you've ever heard of type 2 fun, but type 1 fun is like maybe go play golf or you go out to eat with friends, and it's fun, right? It's fun. You do it, you have fun, great time. Type 2 fun is the kind of stuff when you're doing it, you're like, I think this sucks. I don't like it. I want to quit. It's hard. I'm uncomfortable. But then you get home and you're like, oh, I can't wait to do it again.
Yes.
And those are things that I gravitate to.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really fun. Beautiful. Well, hey, look, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. Thank you for sharing all your tips and tools and your background. And I shall look forward to hopefully seeing you over in the US sometime soon.
I hope so. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for including me, Debra. You have a great weekend.
My absolute pleasure. You too. Thank you.